Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to have a little bit of a brief discussion on why you can't learn a second language. I think a lot of people have had experience with trying to learn a language, maybe something they're interested in. It could also be something maybe they have a class in college or something they have to take, but I think generally speaking, most of us have had some experience with a second language. And for those of us who really want to gain fluency, it can become very irritating to spend years and years learning and feeling like you're not getting anywhere. So today we're going to talk about a few things. First thing I want to talk about is grammar over content. I know a lot of teachers who teach language, they tend to emphasize the importance of grammar. And while grammar may have some important features in language, it is not as important as other things. So a good example of this, Noam Chomsky had a sentence that he, created. It's, "Colorless green ideas sleep furiously." So that sentence makes no sense, but the grammar is correct. There's no incorrect grammar there. And so thinking of how grammar impacts the content or the understanding of the sentence doesn't really matter there. And there are lots of times where if you were to take sentences in English, for example, and you alter the grammar, it might change the meaning slightly, but the meaning doesn't change as much as if you were to change the word or the pronunciation of a word. So like intelligibility, which is whether or not people understand you, that has more of an impact on comprehension than grammar does. Just like if I were a Chinese speaker and I learn English and I'm bad with tense and I want to say, "I came here yesterday," and I say, "I come here yesterday," no one will ask, "When did you come? Was it today or yesterday?" Because the time word yesterday indicates the meaning. So it's just things like that that kind of like put people in this position to fail because you're focusing on things that don't matter. I mean, they do, but they're not crucial for you learning. Think about children when they learn English or when they learn another language that's their mother tongue. They don't learn grammar. They're not sat down and taught grammar rules at the beginning. And a lot of times they learn grammar intrinsically. And if you think about things like, think of the verb to eat, like the past tense is ate, right? Like I ate. What will children say? I eated. And no matter how many times you correct them as an adult, a lot of times they'll still say I eated. And over time they'll learn, oh, it's not eated, it's ate. But the thing is the ed, that's the morpheme for the grammatical morpheme for past tense. That means the child has learned the rule without actually knowing what the rule is. Like they may not be able to explicitly state what the rule is. And so things like that kind of makes it difficult for students to learn. One of the problems is I think adults go into classes with the expectation of learning grammar. And so then they think if I don't learn grammar, I'm not learning the language, when a lot of times learning the grammar is not learning the language. Grammar is linguistics, not language, okay? Language might use grammar, but the study of grammar is not a language thing. It is a linguistics thing. Language would be more of like you learning the practical use of a language, which may involve grammar, but that should never be the focus on language learning. You should be focusing on the message, the overall content of what you're trying to say, and whether or not the other person or people understand what you're saying. Another reason why we struggle with learning the second language can be explained with growth mindset and fixed mindset, which was hypothesized by Carol Dweck. So a growth mindset means that you believe that even if you cannot do something now, you have the ability to learn how to do it. Whereas a fixed mindset would say you're either born with it or you're not. So if you're really good at language learning, that means you were born with it and that's your niche, that's what you're going to be able to do. But for me, I wasn't born with it, so I can't learn it. And I've heard people say this before. I've seen it in like TV shows too, like Family Guy. Stewie has a thing where he says it. But it's like whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And that's kind of growth mindset and fixed mindset. If you believe you can't, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to succeed. If you believe you can, you're more likely to succeed. Now that doesn't guarantee it. That doesn't guarantee either way, right? But you're just more likely. And so with language learning, if you go in with this like adult versus children mindset, like, well, I'm an adult now, so I'm going to learn slower and I'm not going to be as good as a child. Research has shown the opposite to be true. Children are not good learners. They may seem to pick things up quickly, but when you compare the amount of like how fast they learn things and how fast they can understand the things they learn, it's much slower than an adult. The research I've read has said that maybe with the exception of pronunciation, right? Like children seem to learn pronunciation better than adults, and that could be for various reasons, like their mouths are still forming, so they're able to make those sounds. But generally speaking, children learn way slower than adults. I mean, pick any task. Pick any task and teach it to a child and then teach it to an adult. Most of the time, children are going to be slower than adults. And so with language learning, if you go into a class or go into learning expecting to not learn well, you're probably not going to learn well. When instead you should say, I'm capable, and adults can learn. Our brains are capable of learning. It doesn't matter your age. I mean, you might say like, well, I'm really old now, so my memory is bad. And like, I mean, sure, maybe, but part of the thing is with language learning, you're going to be learning things that you'll forget over time, just like anyone else would with any language. I forget English words all the time. I forget Chinese words all the time. My mom forgets English words. She only speaks English, right? So to just say, I have a bad memory, therefore I'm not going to be good at it, you're going to set yourself up for failure, when instead you should be saying, if I have a bad memory, per se, what can I do to help with that? So maybe spend more time reading, spend more time involving yourself in the language, or find certain things that work for you. Sometimes flashcards work really well for people, sometimes they don't. Maybe you could do a memory game, or you could do things where after you've learned something, maybe you wait an hour or two and then you try to talk through it or try to recall the information, right? There's different memory tactics you can use to help you with learning a language. Another issue that people have is they don't use the language. So if you're learning anything, theoretically and realistically, you should be using it, right? So if you spend a lot of time and you're learning all these things and then you just never use them, it would be ridiculous. Imagine if you took a dance class and you just spent your entire time learning dance theory. You never once move in the class. You just sit there reading and writing. Obviously, you're not going to be a good dancer, right? You haven't perfected the skills that your body needs, It's the same thing with language learning. So if you're just doing reading and writing, you're going to be really good at reading and writing, but you're going to struggle with listening and speaking. And part of that has to do with the way the brain works. You can learn things from reading that you can use in speech. Just like speaking might help your reading, but obviously speaking isn't going to make you a fluent reader, and reading is not going to make you a fluent speaker. You have to be able to use those in context. So for me, like I play video games. I spend time playing games with friends. They teach me new words all the time. I might ask them, what is that? I don't know what that is. And they explain it to me, but we're using the language. It's in use. I don't care about grammar. And in fact, if my friends correct my grammar, I might tell them I don't care about my grammar. I want you to explain the word to me. I mean, there might be times where they say like, well, if you say it that way, it changes the meaning. Okay, well then explain the function to me. But a lot of times it doesn't really matter. Think about in English, if I say I have 2 dog, well, you might assume it's a verb, right? I have 2 dog. But if you say like I have 3 dog, I have 4 dog, you would guess pretty quickly that they mean 4 dogs or 3 dogs. There's no need to say you have to add an S, otherwise we'll never understand you. I mean, this idea of like correct language use is, well, it's a little outdated. I get the point, but there's a lot of things people say and do that don't use correct language and nobody corrects them. Like people in power or people in positions where you would assume they speak proper English or they speak proper whatever, but it's undefinable. Like linguists have a hard time defining what proper language is anyway, so we really shouldn't care too much about it. But the goal is using it. So when you're learning the language, you should be able to learn it so that you can use it. So you can listen, so you can read, so you can write, so you can speak, so you can communicate. And then the last thing I want to talk about is study habits. I know that with language learning, it's really easy to kind of lose motivation partway through. And then, of course, you feel like you don't have time to do it. But I would say a little bit goes a long way. If you spend, 15 to 20 minutes a day, which isn't much, but if you spend it and you're learning something, and then maybe at the end of the day, try to recall what you learned, you're going to be making progress. I mean, it'll be slow progress, but you'll at least be making it. As opposed to like you study really hard and then just drop off, And that's, I think people get burnout was they go ham, they go all in and then they burn out and they drop off. Whereas instead you should try taking a slower approach. And if you can connect it to your real life context, it's going to be really easy to get involved in language learning. When I was learning Spanish, I had Mexican friends, and a lot of times I would ask them, like, can we just have a conversation in Spanish? Or like maybe they're talking in Spanish, can I just listen to you? And if I have questions, can I ask, you know? I mean, there's lots of things, like many cities in America have communities of speakers, you know, like even in my city, there's a community of French speakers, Spanish speakers, Vietnamese speakers, Chinese speakers, Korean speakers. Like you can find them. And if you find them, you can spend time with them, you know, and then you'll make new friends. And in doing that, you're going to have more opportunities with the language. The other thing too is people kind of assume if you study abroad, like if I could just go abroad, if I was just able to go to that country, I would learn. That's actually not accurate. I've been in China for 8 years, and I've met many, 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 many foreigners who are learning Chinese. I've met many foreigners who came to China to study abroad. They're not fluent in Chinese. I know someone who came here, got a master's degree. I think they would say they're fluent. I would say they're not. And usually this is because it depends on how you define fluency. But fluency for me is being able to speak without having to stop all the time or without having to like constantly correct your thoughts. That doesn't mean necessarily 100% grammatically correct. Like grammatically incorrect doesn't really matter a whole lot to me. If you're fluent, you can get your point across, people understand you. And obviously there's levels of fluency. Like if you have a really high level of fluency, you would be similar or close to a native speaker. And so then of course, like you might be indistinguishable, but that's indistinguishable from a native speaker is not always a good criteria, because I would say my Chinese is probably like C1, maybe between C1 and C2. And I am sometimes indistinguishable from a native speaker, but it depends on what I'm saying, because I know I have an accent. Like there are times I say certain words and I have an accent in them. And if I happen to say those words, they might catch that I'm a foreigner, you know, but they don't always do. But if they see my face, obviously, of course, they know I'm a foreigner. This idea that like, if I went abroad, I would do so much better. No. If you go abroad, the chances are you're going to find people who speak your mother tongue, and then you're going to stick around those people and you're going to use that language to communicate instead of the one you're learning. Like when I came to China, I actually didn't want to, I don't like talking with foreigners because it makes me feel like, one, they're not native speakers, and while that doesn't matter, it's just, it sounds wrong to my ears, you know? And if I speak to a native speaker, I at least know the general rule of thumb of how people would say things. So a lot of times when I was with my foreign friends, they would all speak Chinese. I would just speak in English. And they're like, oh, your Chinese is going to be so bad. Even when I was in America, I had a professor say that to me. She was like, oh, you know, you're never going to learn Chinese. I'm the only one out of her class that is fluent now. So it's because I preferred speaking with native speakers. And the research I've read shows that like introverts, actually one of the things they have that goes for them is they're more likely to talk with native speakers, not with classmates. And that has benefits, right? Like you're going to have somebody with an authentic accent. You're going to have somebody with authentic ways of speaking, not textbook ways of speaking. Like I have graded readers in Chinese behind me, and I'll talk about them in another video, but I was going through one of them with one of my students, and he said like that, he's like, this sentence isn't wrong, but no one says that. And it's the same thing in English. Many English books will say a sentence and everyone thinks that's right, and it's technically correct, but nobody says that, you know? Like in China, they always learn, how are you today? I'm fine, thanks. And you? I mean, like, it's not wrong, but I've never had a conversation in English like that ever in my life, and I'm 34. So the context of study abroad or at home doesn't matter so much. What matters is whether or not you're consistent, whether or not you're diligent, whether or not you're seeking opportunities for learning and using the language. And that involves finding things that are connected to your interest with your language, because if you're interested in it, it's going to help you stay motivated when you don't feel motivated. That's why I chose video games. Even if I don't want to learn Chinese, if I play a video game in Chinese, I'm going to end up learning things because I have no other option. My game is in Chinese. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.